Her ship was small and silent, hidden behind layers of technology that made it invisible to every sensor known to the galaxy. The Villari had perfected this art long ago. They watched. They recorded. They never interfered. This was their way, and it had been their way for 10,000 years. Below her, the planet burned. She could see the fires from orbit. Great orange wounds spread across the continents, marking the path of the craft's swarm. The insectoid invaders moved like a disease, consuming everything in their path. Cities that had taken humans centuries to build fell in hours. Forests became ash. Oceans turned dark with debris. Yuna had seen this before. She had watched 17 civilizations fall to the Krath in her lifetime alone. The pattern was always the same. First came the scouts, then the warriors, then the endless swarm that devoured everything. Species that had built great empires became footnotes in the Villari archives. Names forgotten. Cultures erased. Histories ended. She touched the console in front of her, and holographic images appeared in the air. Data streams flowed past her eyes, carrying information about the dying world. Population counts dropping by the millions. Military positions overrun. Communication networks going dark one by one. The humans had fought well, she noted. Better than most. They had held the Krath for almost 3 months, which was impressive for such a young species. Humanity had only discovered space travel 100 years ago. They were children compared to the ancient races of the galaxy. Children facing a monster that had destroyed civilizations far older and stronger. But children still died like everyone else. Yuna shifted her attention to a small area on the northern continent. Her instruments had detected something interesting there. A military outpost called Sigma 7, built into the mountains near a narrow valley. 300 humans remained at this location, the last survivors on the planet. She zoomed in closer, adjusting her sensors to pierce through the smoke and clouds. The outpost was a collection of gray buildings surrounded by walls and weapons. Shuttlecraft sat in the landing area, being loaded with supplies and people. The humans were evacuating. This was sensible, Yuna thought. The Krath swarm would reach this location in less than 2 hours. Running was the only logical choice. She had seen many species run from the Krath. Some escaped. Most did not. She prepared to record the final moments of human presence on this world. Her people would add this data to the great archives, where it would join countless other records of extinction and defeat. Future Villari scholars would study it, perhaps learning nothing new. The lesson was always the same. The galaxy was cruel, and the weak did not survive. Then she saw something that made her pause. A single human was walking away from the evacuation area. Not toward the shuttles, but away from them. Toward the valley where the Krath would soon arrive. Yuna adjusted her sensors, confused. Perhaps this human was confused or injured. Perhaps he had lost his mind to fear. She focused on him, gathering data. He was a male, her instruments told her. 34 years old by human counting. His name appeared in the military record she had intercepted. Kang Do-yun, rank of sergeant. He carried weapons and equipment on his back, heavy packs that made him walk slowly through the rocky terrain. She watched him stop at the mouth of the valley. It was a narrow place with high walls on either side. A natural choke point. One person standing there could slow down an enemy force, at least for a little while. Understanding came to Yuna slowly. This human was not running away. He was not confused or mad. He was going to fight. She checked her calculations. The Krath vanguard numbered over 10,000 warriors. They would reach the valley in 90 minutes. The evacuation shuttles needed at least 60 minutes to launch safely. If the Krath reached the outpost before then, everyone would die. This human was going to buy time with his life. Yuna felt something she had not felt in many years. It was not quite confusion, not quite curiosity. It was something closer to wonder. She had watched many last stands. Warriors of proud species fighting to the end because surrender meant something worse than death. Soldiers protecting their families, their homes, their honor. She had recorded all of it, added it to the archives, and moved on. But those warriors had always fought with hope. They believed they might win, or at least that their sacrifice would be remembered. They fought because their cultures told them to fight, because their leaders commanded it, because their pride demanded it. This human was different. He knew he would die. Her instruments detected his vital signs, and they told a story of a man completely at peace with his end. His heart rate was calm. His breathing was steady. He moved with the careful purpose of someone who had already said goodbye to life. And yet he kept walking toward his death. Yuna opened a channel to her mentor, Tihi, who orbited a planet 3 systems away. She sent a data packet containing everything she had observed. Tihi's response came quickly, carried across the stars by technology that bent space itself. Interesting behavior. Record it for the archives. Self-destructive actions in dying species are common. This does not feel the same, Yuna replied. He is not acting from despair. Then what? Yuna watched the human kneel in the dirt of the valley floor. He was planting something in the ground. Explosives, her sensors told her. He was building traps for the enemy that would kill him. I do not know, she admitted. But I want to understand. Tihi's disapproval came through clearly, even across the vast distance. Understanding is not our purpose. Observation is our purpose. Do not become attached to the subjects. I am not attached. I am curious. Curiosity leads to involvement. Involvement leads to suffering. This is why we watch from afar. Yuna knew her mentor was right. The Vilari had learned this lesson long ago, in the early days of their civilization. They had tried to help other species once. They had shared their technology, their wisdom, their protection, and they had watched those species destroy themselves anyway, or turn against their benefactors or become dependent and weak. So the Vilari had withdrawn. They became watchers, recorders, historians of the galaxy. They did not judge. They did not help. They simply preserved the truth of what happened, so that something would remain when everything else was gone. Yuna closed the channel with Tihi and returned her attention to the valley below. The human had finished his preparations. He sat now with his back against a rock, checking his weapons one final time. The sun was setting on the planet, painting the sky in colors of red and gold. It was beautiful in the way that dying things often were. In 1 hour the craft would come. In 1 hour this human would die. And Yuna would watch, as her people had always watched. But something had changed inside her. A small crack had appeared in the wall she had built around her heart. She did not know it yet, but that crack would grow. It would spread. And eventually it would break everything she believed. All because one human walked toward death instead of away from it. It was not today. It was 3 years ago, on a planet called Kepler 7, when he watched his entire squad burn. 12 soldiers under his command, people who trusted him, people who followed him into a crath nest because he told them they could win. They could not win. He was wrong. And they died for his mistake. He survived only because Jesu pulled him from the flames. His commanding officer, a woman with iron in her spine and patience in her heart, dragged his broken body onto an evacuation shuttle while he screamed for her to let him go back. To let him die with his people? She did not let him go. She saved him. And he had hated her for it, at least for a while. Now he understood. She saved him because soldiers do not get to choose when they die. They only get to choose how? Doyan sat in the valley and checked his rifle. It was a good weapon, reliable and accurate. He had cleaned it that morning, the same way he cleaned it every morning. Routine was important. Routine kept the dark thoughts quiet. Behind him, far in the distance, he could hear the sounds of evacuation. Shuttle engines warming up. People shouting orders. Children crying because they did not understand why they had to leave their homes. He did not look back. Looking back would make this harder. The valley around him was quiet and empty. Rocks and dust and the bones of ancient mountains. Not a bad place to die, he thought. He had seen worse. He thought about the people on those shuttles. 200 civilians, mostly. Families who had been farming this world for 2 generations. Teachers from the colony school. Doctors from the medical center. Old people who had come here to retire, and young people who had come here to start new lives. They did not deserve to die. They had done nothing wrong except exist in a galaxy that did not care about right or wrong. The Krath did not invade because humans were evil. They invaded because humans were there, and the Krath consumed everything that was there. The shuttles needed 60 minutes to launch. The Krath would arrive in 40. Someone needed to fill that gap of 20 minutes. 20 minutes. That was how much his life was worth. Not a bad trade, he thought. 20 minutes of his blood for 60 years of some child's life. 100 children's lives. The math worked out fine. Jisoo had ordered him to evacuate. She was on one of those shuttles now, probably furious at him. She had lost soldiers before, but she had never lost one to choice. She would not understand. Or maybe she would. Jisoo was smart. She would figure out eventually that he had been dead since Kepler-7. His body just had not caught up with his soul. Do-Yun finished checking his rifle and set it beside him. He looked at the sky, where the first stars were appearing in the darkening blue. Somewhere up there, the shuttle would soon carry the survivors to safety. Somewhere up there, life would continue? He was glad. He had not felt glad about anything in 3 years. The ground beneath him trembled. A soft vibration at first, then stronger. The Krath were coming. He could feel them through the earth, thousands of legs moving in perfect rhythm. They did not march like humans did. They flowed like water, like a wave of black chitin and sharp claws. Do-Yun stood up. His body ached. 43 combat missions had left their marks on him, scars and wounds that never quite healed right. He was not a young man anymore. He was not a strong man anymore. But he was still a soldier. And soldiers did their duty until they could not do it anymore. He walked to the first explosive charge and armed it. Then the second. Then the third. He had planted 12 charges throughout the valley, hidden in rocks and beneath the sand. They would not kill many Krath, but they would slow them down. Make them careful. Make them afraid. Fear was a weapon too. Even the Krath could feel fear if you hurt them enough. He returned to his position and raised his rifle. The trembling was louder now. He could hear them clicking and chittering in their alien language, speaking to each other through sounds and thoughts he could not understand. The swarm was communicating, planning, organizing. They did not know he was here. That was his one advantage. Do-Yun looked through the scope of his rifle and saw the first Krath warrior enter the valley. It was tall and black, with 4 arms and 2 legs and a head that was mostly mouth. Its eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, seeing in spectrums that humans could not see. Behind it came more, dozens, hundreds. They filled the valley entrance like dark water rising, climbing over each other in their eagerness to reach the prey beyond. Do-Yun breathed slowly. In, out, he aimed at the lead warrior and fired. The shot echoed through the valley like thunder. The Krath warrior fell, a hole burned through its head. The others stopped, confused. They had not expected resistance here. The prey was supposed to be running. Do-Yun fired again. Another warrior fell. Then the swarm screamed. It was not a sound that humans could make. It was high and sharp, a frequency that hurt to hear. The Krath were calling to each other, sharing information, coordinating their attack. They knew where he was now. Do-Yun smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had finally found his purpose. He detonated the first charge. The explosion tore through the valley entrance, sending rocks and bodies flying. Krath warriors fell in pieces, their dark blood spraying across the stone. The survivors stumbled back, breaking formation. Do-Yun kept firing. Shot after shot, each one finding a target. He was a good marksman. The military had trained him well. He had practiced for years, putting bullets in targets that looked like Krath. Now he was putting bullets in real Krath, and it felt exactly the same. Routine, aim, fire, reload, aim, fire, reload. The Krath pushed forward. They were not afraid of death. They were a hive mind controlled by a single intelligence that valued individual lives less than a human valued a fingernail. Warriors died, and more warriors took their place. Do-yun detonated the second charge. Then the third. The valley became a slaughterhouse. Bodies piled on bodies. The narrow walls forced the Krath into a tight formation, where every bullet hit something and every explosion killed dozens. But they kept coming. They always kept coming. Do-yun checked his ammunition. Half empty. He checked his watch. 23 minutes had passed. He needed to last 37 more. He settled back into position, feeling the burn in his shoulder from the rifle's recoil. His ears were ringing from the explosions. His heart was pounding from adrenaline. But he was calm. For the first time in 3 years, he was completely calm. This was what he was meant for. This was how he would redeem himself for Kepler-7, not by surviving, but by making his death mean something. The Krath charged again. Do-yun raised his rifle and continued to fight. Somewhere in orbit above, unseen and unknown, Yuna watched everything. And her confusion grew with every passing minute. This human should be dead by now. Every calculation said he should be dead. But he was not dead. He was winning. No, not winning. He could never win. But he was not losing either. He was holding. He was holding against 10,000 warriors alone with nothing but his weapons and his will. And Yuna began to understand that she was watching something she had never seen before. Yuna had stopped recording data. She had stopped analyzing patterns. She simply watched, unable to look away, as the impossible unfolded below her. Kang Do-yun should have died in the first 5 minutes. Her calculations had been clear about that. 10,000 Krath warriors against 1 human soldier. The numbers did not lie. The outcome was certain. But the numbers had been wrong. The human had used the valley like a weapon. Every rock, every shadow, every curve of the ancient walls became part of his defense. He moved constantly, never staying in one place long enough for the Krath to focus their attack. He set traps that exploded when the swarm bunched together. He collapsed sections of the cliff face onto advancing warriors. And through it all he kept shooting. Yuna had counted over 400 Krath dead. 400 warriors killed by one man. It was impossible. It was absurd. And yet she had watched it happen with her own eyes. The swarm had pulled back twice to regroup. This alone was remarkable. The Krath did not retreat. Their hive mind pushed them forward regardless of losses, treating individual warriors as expendable pieces of a larger whole. But this human had hurt them so badly that even the swarm commander had to pause and reconsider. Now the third assault was beginning, and Yuna could see that Do-yun was failing. His rifle had overheated and stopped working. He had switched to smaller weapons, handguns that required him to be closer to his targets. His ammunition was nearly exhausted. He had used all 12 of his explosive charges. And he was wounded. Badly wounded. Yuna's medical sensors counted 17 separate injuries on his body. Burns from energy weapons. Cuts from Krath claws that had come too close. A piece of shrapnel buried in his left leg. Blood loss that should have knocked him unconscious. But he was still fighting. She watched him drag himself behind a rock as Krath warriors swarmed toward him. He fired his last pistol rounds, each shot carefully aimed, each bullet finding a target. When the gun clicked empty, he threw it at the nearest warrior and pulled out a knife. A knife against creatures with 4 arms and natural armor. The first Krath reached him. Do-yun moved under its swing and drove the knife into the soft spot beneath its jaw. The warrior fell. Another took its place. Do-yun kicked its legs out and brought the knife down into its eye. 3 more came. He killed 2 before the third knocked him down. Yuna leaned forward in her seat, her heart's beating fast. This was it. This was the end. The human would die now, torn apart by claws and teeth. But Do-yun grabbed the fallen warrior's weapon, a blade meant for Krath hands that looked massive in his human grip. He swung it in a wide arc, cutting through the third warrior's legs. It fell, screaming, and he drove the blade through its skull. He tried to stand. His leg would not support him. He fell back against the rock, holding the craft blade in hands that were shaking from exhaustion and blood loss. And still he did not give up. Yuna made a decision. She would regret it later. She would justify it in 1,000 ways, tell herself that she was just getting closer for better observation, that she was doing her duty as a historian. But the truth was simpler. She needed to understand. Her ship descended through the atmosphere, dropping from orbit in a controlled fall that would have killed most pilots. She landed behind the ridgeline, out of sight of the craft swarm. She opened the hatch and stepped onto the soil of a dying world. The air smelled of smoke and blood. The sounds of battle echoed through the valley, monstrous screams mixing with the crack of breaking stone. Yuna moved quickly, her body naturally adapting to the gravity and atmosphere. She found him where she had seen him fall. He was propped against a rock, the massive craft blade resting across his knees. His eyes were closed, and for a moment she thought he was dead. Then he opened his eyes and looked at her. He did not scream. He did not raise his weapon. He simply looked at her with eyes that had already accepted death and said, "You should leave. They'll be back soon." Yuna studied him. She had never been this close to a human before. He was smaller than she expected and more fragile. His skin was torn and burned, his blood was the wrong color, and his body was clearly failing. By every measure, he was a pitiful creature compared to her own kind. But his eyes were not pitiful. His eyes were clear and calm and absolutely unafraid. "Why did you stay?" she asked. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, forced through a throat not designed for human speech. "Your mathematics said you would die?" He laughed. It was a terrible sound, wet and broken. "Wasn't about math. Then what?" He looked past her, toward the sky where the evacuation shuttles had disappeared an hour ago. Those shuttles had kids on them, teachers, doctors, people who build something better than me. You could have been on those shuttles. No, he shook his head slowly. "I couldn't. I'm already a dead man. Have been for 3 years. Might as well make it count." Yuna did not understand. She reached out with her mind, the telepathic abilities that all Valari possessed, and touched the edge of his thoughts. She expected to find fear. All creatures felt fear when facing death. She expected to find rage. Warriors often burned with anger in their final moments. She expected to find despair. The galaxy was cruel, and despair was the natural response to cruelty. She found none of these things. What she found was peace, a vast, quiet ocean of acceptance. He had made his choice, and he was content with it. He had weighed his life against the lives of strangers, and he had decided that they were worth more. Not because he wanted to be a hero, not because he expected glory or remembrance, because he loved them. People he had never met, children whose names he would never know. He loved them enough to die for them. Yuna pulled back from his mind, shaking. In 10,000 years of observation, she had never felt anything like this. The ground trembled. The Krath were regrouping for their final assault. Doyun gripped his blade and tried to stand. His leg buckled immediately, and he fell. He tried again. Fell again. "Stay down," Yuna said. "You have done enough. Not enough." He was crawling now, dragging himself toward the valley entrance. "Not until the shuttles are safe. Not until they're far enough away." She checked her instruments. The shuttles had reached orbit 15 minutes ago. They were currently engaging their faster-than-light drives. In moments they would be gone, beyond the reach of any Krath ship. "The shuttles are safe," she told him. "They have escaped." He stopped crawling. For a long moment he did not move. Then he rolled onto his back and looked at the stars. A smile crossed his broken face. "Good," he said. "That's good." His eyes began to close. His breathing slowed. And Yuna did something that no Valari had done in 5,000 years. She knelt beside a dying alien and took his hand in hers. "I have watched your species for many years," she said quietly. "I have seen you fight. I have seen you fail. I have recorded your mistakes and your cruelties and your endless wars against each other. He did not respond. She was not sure he could hear her. But I have never seen anything like you. I have never seen a creature love so much that it would die for strangers. She looked up at the stars, feeling tears on her face. Velari were not supposed to cry. Velari were supposed to observe and record and remain unchanged. But she was not unchanged. She would never be unchanged again. I need to tell my people about you, she whispered. I need to tell them what you have shown me. And in that moment, without fully understanding what she was doing, she opened her mind to the telepathic network that connected all Velari across the galaxy. She began to whisper. It was not like human speech, limited by sound and air and distance. When a Velari spoke through the network, every other Velari in the galaxy could hear. The words traveled faster than light, carried on currents of consciousness that flowed between stars like rivers between mountains. Usually the network was quiet. Velari spoke to each other in private channels, one-to-one, careful not to disturb the greater whole. Only in emergencies did someone speak to everyone. Only in emergencies or in moments of profound importance. Yuna had never spoken to the network before. She was young, barely 300 years old, a junior observer on a routine assignment. She had no authority to address her entire species. The elders would be furious. Her mentor would be ashamed. But she could not stay silent. Not after what she had seen. Not after what she had felt when she touched the human's mind. She opened herself to the network and whispered, "They are not like the others." 1,000,000,000 Velari heard her. Across 1,000 worlds, in ships and stations and ancient libraries, her people stopped what they were doing and listened. They do not fight because they think they will win. Confusion rippled through the network. Questions began to form. Who was speaking? What was she saying? Why was she interrupting the silence? They fight because fighting is how they love. The network went completely still. Yuna felt the weight of her people's attention pressing down on her. She had broken the greatest rule of her civilization. She had made a judgment. Not an observation, not a recording, but a declaration that a species was different. That a species was worthy of notice. In 10,000 years, no Velari had ever done this. The first response came from Elder Hana, leader of the High Council, whose voice carried the authority of millennia. Who speaks? I am Yuna, observer, 3rd class, assigned to the human sector. What you have said is forbidden? We do not judge. We do not declare. We watch and we record. I know, but I could not stay silent. Why? Yuna looked down at the human lying beside her. His breathing was very shallow now. His hand was cold in hers. He was dying, and he did not even know that his death had just changed the course of galactic history. Because I touched his mind, she said. And I found something that our records have never captured. Something that our observations have never explained. What did you find? Love without condition. Sacrifice without hope. He is dying for people he has never met. Not because he wants glory, not because he fears shame, but because he believes their lives are worth more than his own. Elder Hannah's voice was heavy with doubt. Many species sacrifice themselves. This is not unique. It is unique. I have watched 17 extinctions. I have seen warriors fight to the last, but they always fought for something. For honor. For vengeance. For a chance at victory, however small. Yuna paused, searching for the right words. This human fights for nothing. He gains nothing. He expects nothing. He simply loves, and his love demands that he stand between strangers and death. The network buzzed with 1,000 voices. Arguments erupted. Skeptics demanded proof. Believers asked for more details. The ancient order of the Velari, unchanged for millennia, began to crack. Tihi's voice cut through the noise, sharp with anger. You have broken your oath. You have interfered with the subjects. You have contaminated the observation. I have, Yuna admitted. And I would do it again. Why? Because watching is not enough. Recording is not enough. We have watched civilizations die for 10,000 years. We have filled our archives with the stories of the dead. And what has it gained us? What have we learned? Silence. We have learned nothing, Una continued. We have learned that the galaxy is cruel and that the weak perish. We knew this already. A child knows this. We did not need 10,000 years of observation to discover what any creature with eyes could see. Then what would you have us do? Elder Hannah asked. Interfere? Help? We tried that once. We know how it ends. I do not know what we should do, but I know what this human has shown me. I know that there is something in his species that we do not have. Something that we lost, perhaps, or something that we never possessed. And what is that? Una looked at the stars. So many stars, so many worlds, so many species rising and falling in the endless dance of creation and destruction. The Villari had watched it all, recording everything, changing nothing. They are willing to love things they cannot keep, she said. They are willing to build things that will be destroyed. They are willing to hope when hope is foolish and fight when fighting is useless and die when dying gains them nothing. That is madness, is it? Una felt something stirring inside her, something that had been asleep for centuries. Or is it the only sanity in a universe that offers no meaning? They create meaning. They forge purpose from nothing. They look at the cold, empty dark and they say, "This will not stand. I will stand instead." The network was silent for a long moment. Then slowly a new voice emerged. It was an ancient voice, older than Elder Hannah, older than any living Villari. It came from the deep archives, where the oldest of their kind slept in crystal chambers, dreaming of times long past. I remember, the ancient voice said. I remember when we were young. I remember when we loved like this. More ancient voices joined in. Memories flowed through the network, images of a time before the watching began. A time when the Villari built and fought and dreamed. We stopped, another ancient said. We stopped because the pain was too great. We stopped because loss was too heavy. We stopped because it was easier to watch than to feel. We stopped being alive, a third ancient whispered. We have been dead for 10,000 years and we did not even know it. Elder Hannah's voice was shaken. What are you saying? I am saying that this young one has shown us ourselves. We were afraid of death, so we stopped living. We were afraid of loss, so we stopped loving. And now we float in the void, recording the lives of others because we no longer have lives of our own. The network erupted again, but this time it was different. This time, Una could feel something changing. The ancient certainties were crumbling. The walls that had protected her people for millennia were developing cracks. Below her, the Krath swarm was gathering for its final assault. The human beside her was nearly dead. The moment was almost over. But the ripples from that moment were spreading across the galaxy, touching minds that had been closed for centuries. Una did not know what would happen next. She did not know if her people would choose to change or retreat further into their silence. She did not know if this one human sacrifice would matter in the end. But she knew one thing. She would not let him die alone. She stood and faced the valley where the Krath were beginning their advance. She had no weapons. She had no training for combat. She was a historian, an observer, a watcher of death. But today she would stand. What are you doing? Tihi's voice was frantic. You cannot fight them. You will die. Perhaps, Una said. But I will not die watching. She stepped forward to meet the swarm. And behind her, across 1,000 worlds, her people began to wake up. The Villari High Council had not gathered in emergency session for 2,000 years. The last time was when a rogue Villari had attempted to interfere with a species' development, providing them with advanced technology in an attempt to save them from extinction. The council had debated for 7 days before deciding to retrieve the technology and let the species fall. It was a harsh lesson, but necessary. The Villari did not interfere. Now they gathered again in a chamber carved from living crystal at the heart of their homeworld. 13 elders sat in a circle of light, their ancient bodies frail but their minds sharp as stellar radiation. Elder Hannah presided, her silver eyes reflecting the glow of data streams that filled the air around them. At the center of the circle, a holographic projection showed the planet where Yuna had made her declaration. The images were being transmitted in real time, showing the young observer standing before the Krath swarm with nothing but her, small body between them and the dying human behind her. "She will die," Tihi said. She had been summoned from her observation post to speak as Yuna's mentor. "She has no weapons, no defenses. The Krath will tear her apart." "She knew this when she stepped forward," Elder Hannah replied. "She chose to die rather than watch. It is madness. It is against everything we have taught for 10,000 years. Is it?" The question came from the Ancient One who had spoken through the network, now attending the council through a remote connection from the deep archives. His name was Jiangsu, and he was the oldest living Velari, nearly 50,000 years old. Or is it the first sane thing any of us has done in a very long time? The council members shifted uncomfortably. Challenging the old ways was dangerous. The traditions existed for reasons, good reasons forged in the fire of ancient mistakes. "We have heard the arguments," Elder Hannah said. "Now let us discuss the evidence. Tihi, you have observed humanity for decades. Tell us what you have seen." Tihi stood and projected her own data into the air. Images of human history appeared, wars and plagues and disasters of every kind. "Humanity is a violent species," she began. "They have fought each other constantly since they developed tools. They have destroyed their own environment, poisoned their own waters, split atoms in their own cities. They are self-destructive and short-sighted and driven by emotions they cannot control." She paused, changing the projection to show different images. A human doctor treating patients in a disease zone, knowing she would likely catch the illness herself. A human soldier carrying a wounded enemy away from battle. A human stranger jumping into a frozen river to save a drowning child. "But they are also this," Tihi continued, her voice softer now. "They build hospitals in war zones. They protect the children of their enemies. They die for people they have never met." "This is contradictory," one of the council members said. "They cannot be both violent and compassionate. They are both. That is what makes them strange." Tizi's eyes moved to the projection of Yuna, who was still standing before the Krath swarm. "That is what makes them dangerous. And perhaps that is what makes them beautiful." Elder Hannah raised her hand for silence. "We have recorded many species with similar traits. Compassion is not unique to humanity." "No," the ancient Jiangsu agreed. "But the scale of it is. The depth of it is. I have searched our archives for 10,000 years. I have found no other species that consistently produces individuals willing to die for complete strangers. Most species protect their families, their tribes, their nations. Humans protect anyone. Why?" asked another council member. "Because they see themselves in others. Their minds create connections where none exist. They look at a stranger and think, that could be me. That could be my child. That could be my friend, and they act on these false connections as if they were real." "Empathy," Tihi said. "They call it empathy." "We have empathy," Elder Hannah pointed out. "Our telepathic abilities allow us to feel what others feel more directly than any human can." "Yes, and what have we done with that ability?" Jiangsu's ancient voice carried a weight of sorrow. "We have used it to watch, to record, to experience the suffering of others without lifting a hand to stop it. Our empathy has become a tool for observation, not a call to action." Silence fell over the council. In the projection, the Krath swarm had stopped advancing. They seemed confused by Yuna's presence, uncertain how to respond to a creature that did not run or fight. She simply stood there, arms spread wide, her body between them and the human. "She is buying time," Elder Hannah observed. "The same thing the human did. She is sacrificing herself for a stranger. She learned it from him." Tihi's voice cracked. "She touched his mind, and she learned how to love like a human loves. In a single moment, she changed more than she had in 300 years of living." "And we?" Gosu asked. What have we learned in 50,000 years? What wisdom have we gained that is worth the silence we have kept? No one answered. The projection changed again, showing new images. Vilari ships throughout the galaxy were decloaking, revealing their presence for the first time in centuries. Observers who had watched from hiding were now making themselves visible. It was unheard of. It was chaos. It was the old order crumbling before their eyes. They are choosing, Elder Hana said. Our people are choosing to be seen, to act, to involve themselves. This will end badly, one of the council members said. It always ends badly. We learned this lesson millennia ago. Did we? Gosu asked. Or did we simply learn to be afraid? There is a difference between wisdom and cowardice. Sometimes they look the same from the outside, but in here, he touched his chest. In here we know the difference. Elder Hana stood. She was very old, older than anyone except Jongsu, and the weight of her years showed in every movement. But her voice was strong. I have led this council for 3,000 years. I have upheld the traditions. I have enforced the silence. I have watched species die because helping them would have been against our principles. She looked at the projection of Yuna, still standing before the swarm. I am tired. I am tired of watching. I am tired of recording. I am tired of being wise and cautious and afraid. She turned to face the council. Yuna called humanity worthy. She broke our oldest rule, and I believe she was right to do so. Gasps echoed through the chamber. I call for a vote, Elder Hana continued. Not on whether to help humanity. That ship has already sailed. Our people are already choosing to act. I call for a vote on something more fundamental. What vote? Tihi asked. I call for a vote on whether to remain as we are, watchers, recorders, the living dead, observing the universe from behind walls of tradition and fear. Elder Hana's voice rang through the crystal chamber. Or whether to become something new, something that does not yet have a name, something that this human and this young observer have shown us we could be. The council was silent for a long moment. Then, one by one, they began to vote. In the projection, the Krath swarm finally moved. They charged toward Yuna, claws raised, mouths open. She did not run. And in that moment, as death approached, she felt something she had never felt before. She felt proud to be alive. Yuna had closed her eyes, accepting her death, finding peace in the knowledge that she had finally done something that mattered. She had expected pain, the tearing of claws, the darkness of ending. Instead, she felt warmth. She opened her eyes and saw light. Not the harsh light of weapons or explosions, but something softer, something that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The Krath had stopped moving. All 10,000 of them stood frozen like statues, their claws raised but motionless, their glowing eyes fixed and empty. Above her, the sky was filled with ships. Velari vessels descended through the clouds, hundreds of them, dropping from orbit in a formation that blocked out the stars. They were not warships. The Vilari had not built weapons in millennia, but they carried technology far more powerful than weapons. They carried the ability to break minds. Yuna understood what was happening. The Vilari had developed the technology long ago, in the days when they still fought wars. It was a pulse that disrupted collective consciousness, that shattered the links between minds in a hive structure. The Krath were controlled by a single swarm commander, one mind directing millions of Badas. When that link was broken, each individual Krath was suddenly alone for the first time in its existence. Alone and terrified. The Krath warriors began to scream. It was not the organized war cry she had heard before. It was chaos, each individual voice crying out in confusion and fear. They dropped their weapons. They covered their eyes. Some fell to the ground and curled into balls, overwhelmed by sensations they had never felt before. Individual thought, individual fear, individual existence. For creatures that had lived their entire lives as parts of a greater whole, it was the most terrifying thing imaginable. The lead ship landed near Yuna, and a team of Vilari emerged. They wore white robes that marked them as healers, and they moved quickly toward the fallen human behind her. "He is alive?" one of them reported. "Barely. We need to get him to a medical bay." Yuna tried to help, but her legs would not hold her. She collapsed onto the dusty ground, her body finally acknowledging the fear and exhaustion she had been suppressing. Strong hands caught her before she fell completely. "Easy, young one." It was Elder Hannah, her silver eyes warm with something Yuna had never seen before. Pride. "You have done well. The human will live. We have technology that can heal him." Elder Hannah helped Yuna to her feet. "But I suspect you already knew that. You were not trying to save him with your body. You were sending a message." Yuna nodded weakly. "I wanted you to see. I wanted everyone to see. We saw, and we have made our choice." Around them, more Vilari ships were landing. Teams spread out across the battlefield, treating wounded Krath with the same care they gave to each other. The confused aliens did not resist. They could not resist. They had been soldiers their entire lives, controlled by a will that was not their own. Now they were individuals, free for the first time, and they had no idea what to do with that freedom. "What will happen to them?" Yuna asked. "We will give them a choice, something they have never had before. They can return to their hive, or they can remain as individuals. We will help them either way, and if they choose to fight?" Elder Hannah smiled sadly. "Some will. Old habits are not easily broken. But many will not. Many will discover that they prefer freedom to slavery, even if freedom is frightening." They carried Do-Yun to a medical ship, where healers surrounded him with machines that pulsed with soft light. Yuna watched through a window as they worked, repairing damage that would have killed any creature without Vilari intervention. Tihi appeared beside her, silent for a long moment before speaking. "I owe you an apology." Yuna turned to look at her mentor. "For what?" "For teaching you to watch without acting. For raising you to believe that observation was enough." T's eyes were wet with tears. "I thought I was preparing you for the universe. I was only preparing you to be afraid of it." "You taught me to see clearly," Yuna said. "Without your training, I would not have recognized what I saw in the human. I would not have understood why it mattered. But I did not teach you to act. That you learned from him." They stood together, watching the healers work. "What happens now?" Yuna asked. "Now? Now everything changes." Tihi gestured toward the window, and beyond it to the sky full of Vilari ships. The council voted. 9-4 in favor of ending the silence. "We are no longer watchers. We are something else. Something new. What will we become?" "I do not know. That is part of what makes it frightening." T paused. "And part of what makes it wonderful." Hours passed. The sun set on the ruined planet, painting the sky in colors of gold and purple. The Krath swarm had been scattered, their warriors wandering the landscape in confused groups, being gently guided by Vilari teams toward shelter and food. It was strange to see creatures that had been monsters become something else, something almost pitiable. Yuna stayed by the medical bay, refusing to leave until she knew the human would survive. Finally, the chief healer emerged. "He will live." His body was badly damaged, but humans are surprisingly resilient. Their cells regenerate faster than most carbon-based species. "Can I see him?" The healer hesitated. "He is awake. But be gentle. His mind has been through much, and we do not fully understand human psychology." Yuna entered the medical bay. Do-Yun was lying on a bed designed for larger creatures, making him look even smaller than he was. His wounds had been healed, but he still looked tired, worn down by something that medical technology could not fix. He turned his head when she entered. His eyes widened slightly. "You're real," he said. "I thought I imagined you. I am real." Yuna sat beside his bed. "How do you feel?" "Like I should be dead." He tried to sit up, winced, and settled back down. "The shuttles, they escaped. Everyone is safe." He closed his eyes, and Yuna saw moisture leaking from beneath his eyelids. Humans cried when they felt strong emotions, she knew. It was a strange response, but in this moment it seemed appropriate. "Good," he said. "That's good. You fought well. Better than any warrior I have ever observed." "I wasn't trying to fight well. I was just trying to buy time." He opened his eyes and looked at her. "Why did you help me? Your people don't interfere. Everyone knows that." Yuna considered the question. It deserved an honest answer. "Because you taught me something. When I touched your mind, I felt what you felt. You were at peace with your death because you believed it would save others. You had no hope of victory, no expectation of reward. You simply loved, and your love was stronger than your fear." She placed her hand over his, feeling the warmth of his skin. "I have lived for 300 years. I have watched civilizations rise and fall. I have recorded more deaths than any human could count. And in all that time, I never felt anything as powerful as what you felt in that canyon." "What did I feel?" Yuna smiled. It was an expression she had learned from watching humans, but it felt natural now. "You felt like your life meant something. Not because of what you had done, but because of what you were willing to do." Do-yeon was silent for a long moment. "I thought I was dead already," he said finally. "I thought I was just finishing what started on Kepler 7. Perhaps you were. But something new has started now." Yuna looked out the window, where Valari ships continued to descend from the sky. "My people have awakened? For the first time in 10,000 years, we are choosing to live instead of just watch. Because of me? Because of what you showed us. That love is worth dying for. That fighting for strangers is the most human thing there is." She paused. "We want to learn how to be human. Will you teach us?" Do-yeon laughed. It was a small sound, weak and tired, but it was real. "I'm not a very good example of humanity," he said. "You are the best example I have ever seen." Outside, the first stars were appearing in the evening sky. A new night was beginning on a world that had almost died. And in that night, two species were finding each other for the first time. Everything was about to change. Do-yeon stood at the window of the Alliance Assembly Hall, looking out at a city that had not existed when he made his last stand. The capital of New Unity, they called it. Built by humans and Valari working together, using technology that neither species could have developed alone. Behind him, the great hall was filling with delegates. Humans and Valari, of course, but also others. The Miran, a species of aquatic beings who had been hiding from the Krath for centuries. The Tellan, whose homeworld had been saved by the Alliance fleet 3 years ago. Even some Krath, individuals who had chosen freedom over the Hive, now serving as advisors on how to help others make the same choice. The galaxy was changing. Slowly, carefully, but changing nonetheless. "You should sit down," Yuna said, appearing beside him. She wore the robes of an ambassador now, white and silver, though she still carried herself with the quiet watchfulness of an observer. "The ceremony will begin soon. I'm not good at ceremonies." "I know. But this one matters." She was right, of course. Today was the 5th anniversary of the Battle of Sigma 7, as it had come to be called. The day one human soldier held a valley against 10,000 enemies. The day a young Valari observer whispered words that changed her entire species. The day the galaxy began to wake up. Do-yeon turned from the window and walked to his seat at the front of the hall. The scars from his wounds had faded, thanks to Valari healing technology, but some remained by his choice. He wanted to remember what he had done and why. Jisoo was waiting for him in the front row. His former commander had become one of the leading figures in the Alliance, her strategic mind proving as valuable in peace as it had been in war. She smiled when she saw him. "Ready for your speech?" "No. Good. Your best speeches are the ones you don't prepare." The hall fell silent as Elder Hannah took the podium. She was older now, moving more slowly, but her voice still carried the weight of millennia. "We gather today to remember," she began. "But not in the way my people once remembered. We do not gather to record events for an archive. We do not gather to observe from a distance. We gather to celebrate something that changed us all. She turned to look at Do-yeon. 5 years ago, I received a report of a human soldier making a last stand against impossible odds. I expected to add his death to our records and move on. Instead, I witnessed something that challenged 10,000 years of Valari wisdom. Images appeared in the air above the assembly. The valley, the swarm. The one small figure standing against the tide. One man, alone, fighting not for victory but for time. Not for glory but for love. He knew he would die. He fought anyway. Because somewhere behind him, strangers were running toward safety, and he believed their lives were worth more than his own. The images changed to show Yuna, kneeling beside Do-yeon's wounded body. One observer, young and uncertain, breaking every rule she had been taught. She touched his mind and found something she had never encountered before. Something that made her stand up and face death herself. Something that made her whisper words that would echo across the galaxy. Elder Hana paused, letting the weight of the moment settle over the assembly. She said, "They fight because fighting is how they love," and in that moment everything changed. The images showed the Valari fleet descending, the Krath swarm stopping, the beginning of something new. "We were watchers," Elder Hana continued. "We told ourselves that observation was wisdom, that standing apart was strength. We were wrong. We were not wise. We were afraid. We were not strong. We were hiding." She looked out at the mixed assembly, species who would never have sat together 5 years ago. Humanity taught us how to live again. They taught us that love is not something to observe. It is something to act on. They taught us that sacrifice is not logical, but it is necessary. They taught us that the universe is cold and empty, and the only warmth comes from creatures who choose to care for each other. She stepped back from the podium. I asked Ambassador Yuna to say a few words. Yuna rose and walked to the front. She was calm, but Do-yeon could see the nervousness beneath her composure. Public speaking was still difficult for her. Her people communicated through thought, not words. "I have prepared a speech," she said, "but I'm going to ignore it." Laughter rippled through the assembly. "My people watched the galaxy for 10,000 years. We saw empires rise and fall. We recorded everything and saved nothing. We believed wisdom meant standing apart." She turned to look at Do-yeon. "One human taught us that wisdom means standing with." She reached into her robes and pulled out a small crystal. It glowed with soft light, containing data that could not be expressed in words. "This is the new record. The first entry in the Valari archive since we broke our silence. It will be placed in the Grand Archive alongside records of every species we have ever observed. But it is different from those records." She held up the crystal. "Those records described what we saw. This record describes what we learned." The crystal's light grew brighter, projecting words into the air. Words in every language of every species present, translated and understood by all. "They fight because fighting is how they love, and they taught us to love the same way." The assembly was silent. Then, slowly, Yuna turned to Do-yeon. 5 years ago, I asked you to teach us how to be human. You refused. You said you were not a good example of humanity." She smiled. "You were wrong. You are the best example any of us has ever seen. And so I ask you now, one more time, to speak? Not as a soldier. Not as a symbol. Just as Kang Do-yeon, the man who taught an ancient species how to love." Do-yeon stood. His legs were steady now, healed by technology that would have seemed like magic 5 years ago. He walked to the podium, feeling the eyes of 1,000 delegates on him. He had not prepared a speech. Tsu was right. His best words came when he did not plan them. "I'm not special," he began. His voice was rough, nothing like the smooth tones of the politicians and diplomats who usually spoke here. "I'm just a soldier who got lucky. Someone saved me when I should have died, and I spent 3 years feeling guilty about it. I thought I owed a debt I could never repay." He looked out at the assembly. Human faces. Valari faces. Other faces he was still learning to read. "Then I found a way to repay it. Or so I thought." I stood in that valley expecting to die, and I was at peace with that. I thought I was squaring my account with the universe. He paused, remembering the weight of the rifle in his hands, the sound of the craft approaching, the certainty that his story was ending. But the universe doesn't work that way. I didn't die. I lived. And I had to learn something much harder than dying. He turned to look at Yuna. I had to learn how to live. He faced the assembly again. I know this. The universe is dark. It's cold. It doesn't care about any of us. Every species here has learned that lesson. The craft taught it to us. The empty void between stars teaches it to us. The silence of dead worlds teaches it to us. His voice grew stronger. But we're here. All of us. Different species, different histories, different ways of seeing the universe. And we're choosing to sit together in this room and build something new. Not because the universe told us to. Not because it makes logical sense. But because we decided to care about each other. He looked at the words still glowing in the air. They fight because fighting is how they love. That's the whole secret. You see someone who needs help, you help them. You see someone who can't fight, you fight for them. And when the darkness comes, and it always comes, you don't run. He paused. You stand. The assembly was quiet for a long moment. Then the applause began. It started with the humans, but the Velari joined in, and then the others, until the hall shook with the sound of many species celebrating together. Do-Yan returned to his seat. Yuna took his hand and held it. Was that good enough? He asked quietly. It was perfect. Outside, the sun was setting over New Unity. The city glowed with lights from 1,000 windows, humans and Velari and others living side by side. Ships rose and fell from the spaceport, carrying cargo and passengers to every corner of the known galaxy. 5 years ago, this world had been dying. Now it was alive. 5 years ago, the Velari had been watchers. Now they were participants. 5 years ago, Do-Yan had been a dead man walking toward his end. Now he was something else entirely. He was a man who had learned how to live. And in the grand archive of the Velari, a new crystal sat in a place of honor. Its light would shine for 10,000 years, carrying a message to everyone who saw it. They fight because fighting is how they love. And they taught us to love the same way.